Okay, let's get right into it, and let's start with just what the committee gave us. Here are the top 4 teams, top 6 really, but top 4 teams. Michigan number 1, Washington 2, Texas 3, and Alabama 4, with Florida State undefeated, ACC champion, 13-0 on the outside looking in at number 5, and Georgia going from number 1 all the way to number 6. After that loss to the Crimson Tide, they're 12-1 and they're 6th in the country. So, as that was revealing, I was thinking to myself, this is the most unknown and thus will be the most shocking reveal that we've had in the history of the college football playoff. I'm watching it. I was actually on a flight. So I'm on a flight. I fly Indianapolis to Houston, and then I'm on the Houston back to Orange County leg of my travels on Sunday morning, and I'm watching, and I'm sitting there enthralled with the suspense of everything going on Sunday morning, and watching along with you, wishing they would just put the graphic up, because I'm like, if you tell me the graphics guy has it on the Viz machine, and then you're waiting 15 more minutes, now I'm just upset about it. But I was being impatient like everybody else. That was a suspenseful moment. I did not know who they were going to give us. I generally feel like I always have a good idea. I did not know what they were going to give us for the 4th team. However, it wasn't when the 4th team came up, and this is where I'll start today. I knew the result as soon as Texas hit the number 3 spot. As soon as Texas was number 3, I knew Florida State was out. Because in my mind, when you look at these teams and when you debate these resumes and when you look at everything in totality, I think it's pretty easy to see that Alabama was going to be 1 spot below Texas, period. 1 spot below Texas, regardless of where Texas was. So when Texas hit number 3, I thought to myself, there's no way that Florida State is going to sandwich and win a specific argument with Alabama based on the criteria that the committee was given. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So as soon as Texas was number 3 and that 3 spot wasn't Florida State was out. Their best shot was to be number 3, to be grouped with the undefeateds at the top, like the committee had done in all of their rankings up to this point this season. And then the debate would have been Texas and Alabama for the 4 spot, okay? So as soon as Texas pops up, I'm like, boom, here we go, and cue the Tide. And there it was, Alabama at number 4, and Florida State was left out as an undefeated Power 5 champ and an ACC champ nonetheless. So that was my immediate reaction. Now, the question will now become, well, is it right? Okay. Did they get it right? Did they get it wrong? I think that's kind of the wrong question to answer, to talk about, to debate. I want to debate something that's larger than that, which is the overall makeup. Okay. What I think is, I don't know. I mean, to me, somewhat irrelevant. Now, you may not think so. And obviously you're listening to this show. I said it on Saturday night during our telecast of the Big Ten Championship, and I'll say it now. If you're trying to crown the national champion with the Jordan Travis injury having taken place, then this is the 4 that you would take to the playoff to really decide, like, okay, well, who really is the best team in the country? Does it suck? Yeah. Yeah, it sucks. So I'm not going to sit here and pound the table and say, this is what they had to do. The other way would have been wrong. I don't think the other way would have been wrong. I've also advocated, and I feel like rightly so during the course of the playoff, for teams that deserve to be in. And in this case, Florida State deserved to be in. There's no doubt about that. So to me, the question is not about whether it's right or whether it's wrong. It's about the fact that this sucks. This sucks, right? And now you have to debate these 2 resumes. And in the end, I don't know if it's really about the resume at all. And I'll get into that in a moment. I would say that this system, as I've talked about for years, and if you're a listener to this program, you know that this is the way that I feel. This system is broken. We all know that. I mean, that's obvious. You can't put 13 human beings in a room and offer them incredibly flexible and subjective criteria and then expect them to, quote, get it right. Now, what has taken place for the course of history with the college football playoff is that the committee and we, maybe the college football public, we've gotten incredibly lucky at the end. And the four teams have almost revealed themselves to us. And there have not been a lot of controversial years. There have not been a lot of years where we feel like we're pounding the table saying, how did this team not get in? Now, there might be individual fan bases, but I wouldn't say that has been a resounding feeling throughout college football, maybe up until this point. So the question about did they get it right? I don't know. I don't know. I think it sucks. I think that this situation sucks for Florida State, for college football fans at large, and the system is somewhat broken. But because of its brokenness, here's what's happened through its history. And now I want to let's peek behind the curtain a little bit. And again, this is not an argument for the four teams that they gave us. I just want to walk through, let's take a walk down the path of how this decision was actually made. All right. Not with resumes or rhetoric or narrative, but the human element. Let's really talk about this, because I've said this for years and I believe it to be true. And I believe it's more true today than ever. And that is that this committee of human beings, who, by the way, not one of them is involved full-time in college football. That's just the truth. There's a couple of retired coaches, there's a professor, there's a couple of business guys who also were great college football players, and then a bunch of administrators. So not one person on this 13-person committee is actually committed to this sport specifically full-time. And they are given subjective criteria. And so what has happened in the past, and I believe happened again this year, is that the committee takes, as human beings normally do, the path of least resistance. I've said this for years. And I know that if you've listened to this program, you have heard me talk about this. But let's really walk down the path of what does that actually mean? How does that play out in a room on Saturday night after the games are played, after the trophy is handed to Mike Norvell there at the ACC championship game? Well, this is what it looks like. It looks like there are two very clear spots taken in the college football playoff. They think to themselves, hey, we've loved Michigan. Should we keep them number one? And it's like, yep, okay, boom, number one, Michigan. Okay, Washington, yep, boom, there we go. And now we've got two spots and basically three teams that are vying for that spot, because there are three teams that can claim themselves to be conference champions. You've got the ACC champion, Florida State Seminoles. You've got the SEC champion, Alabama Crimson Tide. And you've got the Big 12 champion, Texas Longhorns. Two spots, three teams. Where do we go? Well, when it gets down to the nitty-gritty, as is the case with all of us, by the way, when we make big decisions in any part of our life, if we're buying a home or making a big investment or choosing our kid's school, whatever it is, a relationship decision, generally speaking, at some point during your decision-making process, you'll probably think to yourself, what's the worst-case scenario? All right? The question of what's the worst case scenario is basically path of least resistance. Because what you're going to look at is you're going to say, I'm going to try to avoid the worst case scenario in every one of these moments or opportunities or situations with these teams. Okay, so let's walk through these now. Two teams, three spots. You got Alabama, you got Texas, and you got Florida State. Let's look at what is the worst case scenario. What are you saying no to if you're that committee by keeping this team out of the playoff? Let's start scenario one with Alabama. Let's just say, for sake of argument, they decide Alabama is going to be left out of the college football playoff. Now, could you make an argument for that? Sure, absolutely. They got beat at home by Texas. Their league didn't have the record that it has in the past. And yet, it's still the SEC. It's the SEC champion. This is still a league that has won 6 of 9 college football playoffs. It's a league that won 9 of 16 BCS national championships. That's 15 national championships since 1998. They have been the most dominant league as it relates to recruiting They have been the most dominant league as it relates to putting talent into the National Football League. The depth at the top with, countless now national championship games that we've had between SEC opponents. They have built a reputation as the best conference in the land. And this is not just some team from the SEC. This is not Kentucky with a special season or South Carolina that gets hot and is in this position as an SEC champion. It's Alabama. It is the SEC team. It's the team with the most national championships in history. Their coach happens to be the greatest college football coach in history. That's what the committee would be saying no to if they're leaving Alabama at home. That seems like a path of plenty of resistance, at least to me. They are also the most powerful force in college football because they have the longest tenured commissioner of the power conferences. Greg Sankey wields more power than basically anybody in our sport. And I'm not suggesting that he influenced this. I don't think he would do that. Now, did he stump for his teams? Yes. Did he go on game day and stump for his league? Yes. And that's part of the problem with how our sport is built rather than his specific problem. He has always said, and he has said to me in person, and I like Greg a lot. Greg's really smart. And he has said, I'm going to be unapologetically proud of my league. Good for him. That's his job. That's what those presidents do. But that's what the committee would be saying no to. The most powerful force in college football, the league that has had the most success in recent vintage, and the team that is the flagship team of that league with the greatest college football coach in history. That is a tough no. I'm just saying, for 13 humans, that's a tough no. What's the second path? Texas. Could you leave Texas out? Man, can you really tell the Texas Longhorns, who are about to be members in said SEC conference, that their win at said SEC champion, Alabama, in September didn't matter? The head-to-head was a bridge too far for the committee. They couldn't say, well, no, Alabama was clearly better than Texas, because we would have pointed to just 2 weeks ago when they needed a 4th and 31 to beat an Auburn team that lost by 21 the previous week to New Mexico State. Right? So that's a bridge too far. You couldn't do that. That is a path of most resistance. To say, Texas, sorry, 2 teams go, 1 stays home. You're going to stay home even though you beat Alabama. It's a bridge too far to devalue non-conference schedules to that degree. They couldn't do that. Okay, so now what's the third scenario? Florida State. Well, Joel, they're undefeated. They're Power 5. They played LSU. All of those things, yes. And yet, and this is what breaks my heart, they had the ace up their sleeve of Jordan Travis's injury. Jordan Travis's injury becomes the path of least resistance. And here's the thing, because of that injury, that path becomes immediately vindicated when lines start rolling out with Florida State's line against Georgia in their bowl game. Now they're 14-point dogs. With the lines in the playoff, with how close they are with Texas and Washington and Michigan and Alabama. And it makes me devastated for Jordan Travis. His tweet was devastating. If you're watching the show, it's up now. I'll read it aloud. Jordan Travis tweets out, devastated, heartbroken, in so much disbelief right now. I wish my leg broke earlier in the season so y'all could see this team is so much more than the quarterback. I thought results matter. 13-0, and this roster matches up across any team in those top 4 rankings. I am sorry, go Noles. Whew. Man, that tugs at you. And I have said it from day one when he got injured. My heart is broken for Jordan Travis. I feel terribly for those players at Florida State. That sucks, man. You guys deserve better. There's not a doubt in my mind. the system is broken. And you got put into a position where you became the path of least resistance. And again, that path then immediately becomes vindicated in this day and age of sports gambling. And it's an excuse. And so if you're the committee, that's your out. And so then you go to the criteria and you say to yourself, like, well, does that make sense? And so now let's put up the criteria. Because once you start viewing it through this kind of human lens of like, what are you saying no to? Then you land on this and you're like, well, we've got this injury. And then you've got the criteria. And you start walking through the criteria. And what do you see? You see the criteria say things like conference championships won. Okay, great. Yeah. Strength of schedule, head-to-head competition. Well, head-to-head, there we go. So Texas, gotta go. Comparative outcomes for common opponents. Well, you got the LSU game in there if you want to go there. And then it says, here we go, other relevant factors such as unavailability of key players and coaches that may have affected a team's performance during the season or likely will affect its postseason performance. I'm going to read that last line to you again. The unavailability of a key player that could likely or will affect its postseason performance. And the committee's like, boom, there it is. There's our out. That's our out. That's our path of least resistance. That's the way that we don't have to tell the SEC no. That's the way that we don't have to tell Texas that their head-to-head win over Alabama didn't matter. There's our out. And then we could even sell it to Florida State as like, we didn't want to do this, but look, we had to. And then they become vindicated when the lines come out. And again, Florida State is a 14-point dog to Georgia because they don't have their quarterback. And Michigan-Bama is basically a 1-point game. And Texas-Washington is basically a 4-point game. They become vindicated. The path of least resistance again wins out in the end. And what doesn't get talked about, at least in my estimation, I've been through this committee deal, and I think the mock committee deals, those are only good in terms of its structure. But when you get down to it and you've got to put teams in the college football playoff, you are taking the path of least resistance as a human being. What is the worst case scenario? And then you know what you do? You avoid the worst case scenarios and you choose, there's 3 bad decisions and you choose the lesser of the 3 bad decisions. That's what they did. That's why it sucks. That's why it's broken, right? In so many ways. So did we ever get to a point where it's like, well, did they look at the non-conference schedule? Did they care that Florida State scheduled LSU and that they also beat Florida? No, they didn't. Did they care that the defense was dominant against Louisville? No, I don't believe that they did. Did they care that the SEC for the first time since 2017 was sub 500 in non-conference play against Power 5 opponents at 7-9? No, I don't think that they cared. Like all of that then didn't matter. Didn't matter that Alabama had moments where we felt like they wouldn't even get to this point against South Florida or against Auburn. And so you're left with guys like Mike Norvell, the head coach of Florida State, giving a statement which is 100% accurate. And yet it's just kind of like there's nothing to say to Florida State that will make them feel better. I'm not arguing for these 4 teams. I'm telling you that this is why the committee made the decision that they did. Here's what Mike Norvell had to say, the head coach of Florida State. I am disgusted and infuriated with the committee's decision today to have what was earned on the field taken away because a small group of people decided that they knew better than the results of the games. What is the point of playing the games? Where is the motivation to schedule challenging non-conference games? We are not only an undefeated Power 5 conference champion, but we also played 2 Power 5 non-conference games away from home and won both of them. I don't understand how we are supposed to think this is an acceptable way to evaluate a team. Everything Mike Norvell just said in that statement is 100% accurate. 100% accurate. It's a flawed system. And life sucks sometimes. And unfortunately, Florida State found themselves on the wrong end of it. And I sit here and I look at this. I've loved college football for my entire life. I thought bowl season pre-BCS was incredible. I loved bowl season. I loved New Year's Day. We would get the multiple TVs, right? We had I think 3 TVs. We had a black and white TV. We had our main TV. And then I think my parents had a TV in their room as well. And we would carry them, the big TV, and we would carry them all down into our main basement area. And we would sit there, my dad, my brother, my uncles, my cousins, and we would watch football. We would eat 7-layer dip and nachos and pizza and have wings. And it was awesome. And today, guess what I think to myself? I'm like, you know what today? You know what these teams, do you know what this makeup to me screams for? Is an old school pre-BCS bowl system. I'm like, man, this would be almost incredible. A traditional Rose Bowl with Michigan and Washington playing as undefeateds in a game in which the winner is absolutely going to claim themselves a national champion. Probably an Orange Bowl, with those old ties back to the Big 8 and then into the Big 12 with Texas as a champion. And then they would always have an at-large, and they would always take a team like, Notre Dame or Florida State or Miami. And so Florida State and Texas would be playing in the old Orange Bowl, and Bama would be playing somebody in the Sugar Bowl. Maybe it was Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl. And every game felt important. Nobody opted out. I was always sick to my stomach eating hot wings all night, and it was incredible. And we would know going in that if Florida State won the Orange Bowl and then whoever won the Rose Bowl, that they would claim each of them a national title for themselves. If Florida State lost, though, then the Rose Bowl would be a de facto national championship game. And no one would complain about it. Now, of course, people would complain about it, but, and here's the caveat. All those players would feel like they were playing for a national championship. And in this case, and in this model, we know they aren't from Florida State. So I'm just saying, it brings me back. I'm a little nostalgic about what used to be.
Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel. And you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.